SEP FanFic Readings presents The Watergaw by smokybaltic and ectoheart. Chapter 9. A restless night followed. Draco's fever was worse, and while he felt like he was burning up, he was shaking violently with cold. Hermione did what she could with the fire, and piled everything from her bag on top of them, along with a few evergreen branches for good measure. Still, he clutched at her like she was the only thing standing between him and hypothermia. In the morning, he was groggy and still chilled, although the weather was the mildest it had been. She forced him to drink tea and eat before he was pulling her back down under the blankets with him. "Your body's fighting the infection." She tried to sound like she knew what she was talking about. "My body is getting its ass kicked, if that's the case." She hesitated over how to say what she needed to say, but eventually realized being direct was probably best. "Malfoy, I think I should go."
"What? Where?"
"You need a doctor."
He groaned. "It'll be days. No, don't go."
"I'll set you up here with food and everything. I'll leave markers so I can find my way back. From the top of the hill the other day, it really looked like we weren't too far. I'm sure if I kept on—" She trailed off and Draco shook his head.
"I'm sure you'll be able to find the way out." His eyes were pleading. "Later."
"But you need—"
"No."
"Malfoy, I
don't want to die alone." His voice broke as he said it.
"You won't."
Hermione shook her head vehemently against his chest, swallowing hard.
"I know your type. You'll die at an obscenely old age, in bed with your fifth wife. She'll be very blonde and about 60 years younger than you."
"Sounds lovely." He chuckled, then gave a low hiss of pain. "But you'll do." His hand rose tentatively to wrap around her hand, resting flat on his chest. "You'll do fine." He repeated the words after a moment. She wasn't sure if he meant them for now or later.
"Malfoy."
"Don't." His voice was rough. "Just don't. I can feel it. I know, Granger. I don't think it'll be long. I don't want to be alone." She could only shake her head, burying her face in his shoulder. It's not like I expected to make it very long anyway," he continued. "It's not that I don't." He blinked rapidly and cleared his throat. "There are things I would have liked to do. I would have liked to help you with anything. I would, but maybe it's better this way. I could have been a chew toy for the werewolf, or had my soul fed to a dementor. Maybe this is sparing me something worse. Imagine what Bella—"
"Please don't," she interrupted. "Please stop. I'll stay. For now. When you start feeling a little better, then I'll go."
"Good." He let out a shaky exhale. "Good. Now, I know I'm not in a great position to ask for favors, but I have a favor to ask." She squeezed his hand by way of an answer. "I need you to tell my mum." He closed his eyes for a moment. "Tell her where to find me. Tell her there wasn't any pain. Tell her I was okay with this."
"Stop it," Hermione admonished.
"No, this is important. Tell her it wasn't painful, and that I love her. You'll say it better." He swallowed hard before continuing. "Don't let her be the one to come to find me, though. By then the foxes and the crows." He shuddered. She thought that might be it, but he forced a smile. "And if you tell her about the last couple of weeks, if you could skip the bits where I was a surly bugger, I'd appreciate it." Hermione gave a watery chuckle.
"But if I say you were a joy, I'll lose all credibility."
"Oof," he mimed, pulling a knife out of his heart. "Don't pull your punches, do you? Come on now. You're clever. You'll find a way to sell it."
God, why did he have to be so— "Malfoy," she swallowed.
"Yeah?"
"You've been a joy."
He sighed, and when she glanced up, she found him looking at her like she'd said the strangest thing. "You're going to have to work on your delivery." It wasn't long until he was dozing again, and the morning had passed.
"Do you need help getting up?" she asked gently when he stirred.
"Nah."
"Have you been up at all today?"
He shook his head. "I'm fine. Don't need to. Too cold to go."
Hermione pressed her lips together. She couldn't remember the last time he'd moved from this spot, which meant that in spite of all the fluid she'd been forcing on him, he hadn't needed the loo. His kidneys were probably shutting down. His fever was also worsening, and when he began to say strange things, she worried it might be getting to dangerous levels. She wasn't sure if he was telling her about a Quidditch match or if he actually thought he was there. He brought up an arithmancy assignment and seemed to be trying to actually do the work as if he were on a deadline. It was horrible. When he seemed to be on the cusp of falling asleep again, she whispered to him that she was just going to stretch her legs and got up. She did, in fact, need to stretch her legs and find more kindling, but mostly she needed to be alone. Walking out through the trees, she finally let the tears come as she gathered up sticks. Why couldn't bad things stop happening for 1 fucking minute? Her vision blurred as she continued to mindlessly bend and rise, collecting more stupid wood for another stupid fire in this unending nightmare. She'd never known how trapped you could feel in such a vast emptiness. Not able to properly see where she was going, she tripped and fell hard, sticks digging harshly into her chest. Sitting miserably on the ground, she finally broke. "Ron, please, 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 it's got to be now. You have to come now." She choked on a sob. "Please, Ron, I don't want to have to sit here and watch him die. I don't want to. Please, Ron, don't make me." She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes and gasped for breath, chest heaving. It wasn't fair. They were all just kids. Too much was being asked. This was too much. They weren't supposed to have so many people depending on them. They weren't supposed to be fighting for their lives, given impossible tasks, hunted, attacked, tortured. They weren't supposed to die alone in the woods. She'd been doing her best to keep it together in front of Draco, insisting he was going to be fine and making a joke of it all. But she knew. Deep down, she knew. All the powerlessness she'd felt over the last year, and especially over the last couple weeks, paled now in comparison to watching someone die from a stupid little cut. "Please, Ron, please." She whimpered one last plea as she wiped roughly at her eyes, trying to calm her breath. "Ron, please." She needed to look composed by the time she got back. This wasn't about her. None of this was. Whatever was going to happen, she needed to get through it, and one day, one far-off day, she'd let herself feel it. She straightened her clothes and cleared her throat until she could breathe properly again. Then she gathered her stupid wood and made her way back. There was nothing for it. Draco was hovering on the edge of consciousness when she returned. "Come here," he urged, and she sat down beside him, leaning back against the tree. He lay his head down in her lap, wrapping himself around her legs. She sighed and ran her fingers through his hair. This wasn't getting better. He was half delirious. His eyes had a strange, bright look to them, and his cheeks were tinged pink. "Cold," he shuddered, gripping her tighter and sandwiching her feet between his knees. He already had all the blankets and layers available, so she sent an extra incendio toward the fire in hopes of stoking it up a bit. "Fucking warming charm's not working again," he muttered. "It's stupid to put us in bloody dungeons. My father will hear about this." Hermione's whole body shook with suppressed laughter, but she patted his back consolingly. The muttering continued, although she mostly couldn't make it out, until eventually he drifted off to sleep. Trapped in a manually applied body bind, there was nothing for her to do but sit and think as Draco dozed, and there was nothing good to think about. Even if she had a wand, she wasn't sure if a Patronus wouldn't be beyond her at this point. She wondered what Harry and Ron were doing right now, where they were. Had they found any more Horcruxes? Had they joined back up with the Order, or were they still going at it alone? Why hadn't they sent another Patronus? Maybe they thought she was dead. It might be best if they did. How was it that Horcruxes and her friends presuming her dead had been the cheeriest train of thought available? Why didn't she have a book? She'd never leave home without one again, she fervently swore. And a medical encyclopedia, too, probably. She continued to run her fingers through Draco's hair as she frowned down at his unconscious face, slack and flushed. There was, she realized, the faintest smattering of pale freckles on the tops of his cheekbones. God, she wanted to tease him for it, but they were past that now. Time was just going on and on. It was late afternoon now, and all Hermione was thinking about was the clock. How far could she have gotten if she'd left this morning? Yesterday. Maybe she'd have been arriving back with an air ambulance now. Maybe if they had gone east instead of west at the lock, they'd have been in Inverness or Glasgow before his leg got bad. Magic had spoiled her for travel. Apparition and portkeys made distance effectively meaningless. If they just had a wand, they would have been out of here in less than a minute. Instead, they'd spent weeks wandering, probably in circles, in agony from traversing a measly mile over absurd terrain. And now Draco was out of time. If they could have just found a person, one person, a muggle with a mobile phone even, a wizard of any kind, literally just anyone. But it's not like someone was just going to fall into their lap in the middle of nowhere. Not when the goddamned illuminator wasn't working. There was a reason her Horcrux hunting strategy had been to hide in the wilderness, where no one could find them, except... Holy shit! Malfoy! Malfoy, wake up! She shook him, but he only squeezed his eyes shut tighter. Come on, sweetie, just for a minute. You need to wake up. She patted at his cheeks and was just considering actually slapping him because, fuck, if he couldn't wake up. But then his eyes were open, glazed, but open. Malfoy? Malfoy! I need you! She hovered over him, trying to get him to focus on her, but his eyes were wandering the heavens. Draco, please! Her voice cracked. I need you to do one thing. Just one little thing. Just say one word. For a second, he looked right at her, and she thought he'd snapped out of it, but then he bristled. Don't be an idiot. You can't brew sleeping draught with billywig wings. Before his eyes began rolling again. Fuck, okay. Hermione gave a shaky exhale. Okay. There was only one other option. Gently lifting his head, she slid out from under him. She stamped out the fire and gathered all the possessions into her bag. Draco clung to the blankets when she tried to pull them away, so she had to pry the cloth from his fist before stuffing them into the bag as well. She surveyed the area. About a half-dozen meters off, there was a short, fairly sharp drop of maybe 3 meters. It would do. The unused boughs and branches she'd collected for firewood were tossed over the edge. She took a couple minutes, pacing back and forth across the little clearing, turning over her plan in her mind, looking for flaws. It would have been better, far better, if she'd thought of this a few hours ago. But then, maybe Draco wouldn't have gone along with it if he had had the option. Maybe he wouldn't want this. He had said, no, this was it. This was the plan that was going to work. She returned to Draco's side, crouched down next to him. He was muttering, his head turning erratically from side to side. His right hand, she noticed, kept clenching and unclenching, like he was going for his wand. I wish there was another way. She bit her lip as she scanned his face. It was almost certainly going to hurt later, but she wanted to remember this. His white blonde hair was stuck to his forehead. His brow was furrowed. His gray eyes were unfocused and wandering. I wish we'd had a proper goodbye, but maybe we will. Somehow. Just don't give up. And don't hate me, okay? Please don't hate me. She leaned over him and took his chin between her thumb and finger, making one last attempt to get him to come back to her. To no avail. She nodded with resignation. Okay. I'm sorry about everything that's about to happen. Really, Draco. Really sorry. Be okay, okay? I guess. Goodbye. She bent over and briefly, gently pressed her lips to his. A first and last kiss. Then she rocked back onto the balls of her feet and took a deep breath before whispering, Voldemort. There would be only seconds, she knew. She kicked at Draco's bad leg, and as fast as she could, she was up and sprinting for the ledge, sliding over the precipice just as several ear-splitting cracks of apparitions sounded around her. Draco was crying out in pain from the blow she'd given him and jabbering away nonsensically. Hermione landed hard on her heels and arse, immediately scrambling to pull the boughs she'd tossed down earlier over herself, praying she hadn't kicked up too much dirt. It wasn't much camouflage, but hopefully the snatchers were sufficiently preoccupied and wouldn't go looking. She dug her fingers into the earth to anchor herself. It was an awkward position, but any movement might cause a wayward rock to roll off down the hill, or could dislodge one of the boughs she was using for cover. There was absolutely nothing about this plan that wasn't flimsy. Intellectually, she had known what was going to happen when she broke the taboo, but the reality of summoning armed, dangerous snatchers had unleashed a deluge of fear and adrenaline to her system. She couldn't make out much of what they were saying, but she heard Malfoy several times. One of the men sounded skeptical. A woman's voice said something about a reward. Draco groaned loudly, and Hermione winced. Someone was hurting him. He cried out again, and she had to remind herself she didn't have a wand. If they ever stopped talking, she was certain they'd find her by deafening beating of her heart. Finally, the ringing sound of disapparation echoed down the mountain. She sat still and silent for long minutes afterward. Schrodinger's Malfoy awaited. When she climbed back up to their camp, it was deserted.